Hello, sixth graders. I would like to talk a little bit about the rest of the chapter. So you started reading about winter,
Winter or baboon.
baboon, um, and as I mentioned earlier, we talked in some of our video meetings. Come winter time is when the Ojibwe would split up, and each family group would live in their own kind of group, or what the book calls cluster of wigwams, and several miles away from the other Ojibwe in the area. And they did this because of the scarcity of food. And that means scarcity. When something is scarce, it means there's not a lot of it. So they did that to be able to have an easier time providing food for their families. But just like we talked in the Dakota chapter, the Ojibwe also spent time in the fall preparing for winter, whether that was wild ricing, drying fish, drying meat, out like that. But also during the winter is when the men and boys would hunt. And in this area, they would hunt deer, moose, and elk and other large animals. And they also would trap animals. And one of the things you had in here was a deer call. So just one tool they had to try to attract animals, especially deer. Um, Sometimes the family had more food than they could eat right away, so if they killed an animal, what they would try to do is dry it over a fire, or we call smoke it, to make it last longer. And they are always very willing to share, just like we talked about the Dakota, sharing, generosity, Ohan Washte, with the Dakota word for it was very important. Same with the Ojibwe, sharing with families or neighbors that uh, need help. Maybe they're running low on food, so they'd help each other. So while the men and boys hunted, you read that the women had their own things to do during the winter. They would help by cooking the meals, made jackets, leggings, moccasins, and anything like that that was needed. And also during the winter, the women would help, make nets for the summer fishing. So remember we talked in the summer, the warmer months, the women did the fishing, and women also took care of the small children during this time. And as you read, children would have fun during the winter, of course, when they finished all their chores. They would slide down hills on toboggans. They'd use tree bark as sleds. And they just had a lot of fun playing a lot of different games like Snow Snake and things like that. And then as winter started to come to an end, things started to thaw out more. They would start to move to the shore camp. And then the process begins itself. Um, as you read here, yesterday, we talked about the coming changes. The Ojibwe were not alone in the land of woods and water. Other tribes were nearby. You had like the Cree, Ottawa, Potawatomi, were other groups nearby. The Iroquois were to the east. Sometimes they were allies with them, with these groups, meaning they run the same side. Sometimes they're enemies, and they fought. Um, Eventually, looking at this map here, the Ojibwe, you can see, slowly made their way around Lake Superior and came into the land of the Dakota. And as they did that, they forced the Dakota into the southern part of Minnesota, causing some friction, some problems with them. And there would be times that the Dakota and Ojibwe fought each other. And then eventually the French came in here as part of the fur trade. And we learn about the fur trade next chapter. And the French, a gentleman by the name of Daniel Greysolon Sieur Duluth, realized the fighting between the Ojibwe and the Dakota was not good for the French who wanted furs, because especially the beaver fur. And so they had a meeting, as you're on top of this page, in 1679 at a gathering near present-day Duluth. The two sides formed an alliance. So they agreed to work together. And as part of that alliance, they each got part of it, like the French got the furs that they wanted, and the Ojibwe were now able to hunt on Dakota land. So the Dakota gave up land that they could live on, they could hunt on, and the Ojibwe then gave the Dakota European goods that the French brought for the fur trade. And those European goods can be like, metal pots and pans, guns, blankets, different things like that. So the goods that were being brought up from Europe. So the French gave those to the Ojibwe, and the Ojibwe gave them to the Dakota, and the Dakota gave land back to the Ojibwe. So the reason they did that is because they wanted peace. And that was especially the French wanted peace because they didn't like the two groups, the Ojibwe and the Dakota, fighting each other because that hurt their fur trade. So they formed an alliance, and you can see that's one of the vocab words there. Then as time changed, the French were here, then the English also came, and then also set in there Holland. We call people from Holland Dutch. So a lot more people are coming to this area. So now they're starting not only the Dakota and Ojibwe interacting with each other, they're starting to interact with Europeans coming over, especially those involved with the fur trade. And they started trading more with those European nations. The last little bit I want to talk about today is this word sovereign. Native Americans are considered sovereign groups, meaning they rule themselves. They can make decisions on where they live, who they trade with, who they go to war with. And to this day, the Dakota, the Ojibwe, they are sovereign nations and they live on what we call reservations. So pieces of land that are set aside in an area. So Minnesota, up by Cloquet and Carlton, there we have the Fond du Lac Reservation. So that land is in Minnesota, but they have different rules on those reservations because they're controlled by, in this case, the Ojibwe. And that was something very important to Native American groups. When the land started being taken from them by the United States government, they were able to keep some of their land, not nearly the amount of land they had to begin with, but we'll learn more about that land that was taken from them by the United States government in later chapters this year. But the big thing I want you to know when it talks about sovereign here is the Dakota, the Ojibwe, and other Native American groups have independent tribal governments that are separate from the United States government. So they make their own decisions, like they have their own police forces, they collect their own taxes. And that's why in a lot of cases in Minnesota, you go to, say, a casino. Casinos are on reservation land. In Minnesota, you can't have a casino. But Native Americans can because it's their land. So they have different rules. So that's one example of a sovereign nation being able to do that. Make sure if you didn't look at some of these examples of Ojibwe art in here. And if you have any questions, let me know. But make sure you're answering questions 8 and 9 that were on the packet. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching and take care. Bye.